morning. I want to believe that we have had a good time since the last time we met. Welcome back to English for Journalists and Writers. English for Journalists and Writers. So last week we did have Fancy and who else? So Fancy will just give you an opportunity to say your name, basically who you are. I'm sure you get to know these amazing people as we continue. Was Mary here last class? Mary, you are here. Was Mary here? Roy? She was. Okay, so we will have Fancy. Just say your name, where you come from, and what else? What are we talking about? Those people who introduce themselves. Let's just know you for now. Other details I'm sure we are going to know as we continue. Yes, Fancy, go on.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I'm Fancy. I'm from the summer. I'm happy to meet you guys.
Okay. We hear you, Steve. So let's accord Fancy with the best orientation possible. Please show her the right places, show her the right things, make sure that she feels at home together with other new students, Jimmy, Roy, Rosemary. I don't know why they are running late, but we continue as well. So last class we were talking about, and like I said, for the purposes of Fancy and the people who are probably joining us, this class is more like, remember the English class that you were doing, and English skills? Of course, as we progress, we will now get into English for newsroom, and what happens in newsrooms and all that. But we were discussing about the parts of speech, 8 of them, when to use them. Then we went ahead and talked about the antonyms, the synonyms. We also talked about words that are pronounced the same, but they are spelled differently, isn't it? So what did we call those names? Words that are pronounced the same, and then they have different meaning. Homonyms. So it's important that you understand that, and we were able to list a number of them. In case you missed the notes, please, you can borrow from your friends so that we are on the same page. Today I want us to begin by focusing on something known as punctuation. Then we talk about 4 main stops of punctuation. We have 4 main stops of punctuation. 4 main stops of punctuation. And then we discuss about what really are the 4 main categories of punctuation. And this might seem very easy. Maybe I would pose a question. What is to punctuate? When you're writing a sentence, a long sentence, there ought to be some punctuation marks in between. So what is punctuation? In very simpler terms, people who will be writers in newsrooms, you will be asked, what is punctuation? And this is the time that we don't say the meaning of a shoe is shoe, right? Don't tell me punctuation is punctuation. You cannot use the word to explain the same word, isn't it? What is the meaning of punctuation? Yes, Victor. Arranging your English in order. That's a nice trial. It's a nice trial. Anybody else who wants to try? What is punctuation? So my class, who have been taken through 844 system, they went 8 years in primary school, isn't it? From class 1 up to class 8. They went to Form 1 to Form 4. They are in first year at campus. They don't know what is punctuation. There is no better way to give an assignment than to ask you to go know about the meaning of punctuation. And as you know about that meaning, you should be ashamed of yourself, because imagine, at this level, you are trying to imagine what is punctuation. Anyway, we have 4 major stops of punctuation that are acknowledged universally, right? And these are basically marks that communicate a particular meaning. For example, like we normally say, when you see this particular mark, for example, we say this one is an exclamation mark, correct? You have to understand at what particular time are you required to use a punctuation mark. Do you start a sentence by, the teacher walked in class? The teacher walked in class. That is not correct, because you have started with an exclamation mark. There is a place for this particular mark, certainly not here. So we have 4 main stops of punctuation. The first one is what we call period. The first one is what we call period. The first one is what we call period. And it is actually, that is the symbol. Put in brackets and you put a dot. Period. 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 So, a period. Before we write, I'm sure you have heard people say, especially when they are quite upset or agitated, our typical African mothers, right? They normally used to have a statement, I am not giving you more money. I am not giving you more money, period. It means, amemaliza your story. I am not giving you more money, period. When you hear somebody saying a sentence and at the end of the day he says, period, it means that it's over, correct? So let's understand at what particular circumstances do we actually use periods. A period, and please indicate into brackets, that dot is like a full stop. It indicates the end of a declarative sentence. Declarative sentence. It indicates the end of a declarative sentence. And please note the word declare, because you are making the statement known. If somebody is agitated, I'm telling you, we are done. So the second one, so that is period, and it's given an abbreviation of a dot. The second one is a comma, a comma, a comma, a comma. It separates items in a list. It separates items in a list, clauses, or phrases to clarify meaning. it separates items, clauses, or phrases to clarify meaning. Let's list all of them so that we can have a discussion. The third one is a question mark. A question mark. This is symbol. It indicates that a sentence is a question. It indicates that a sentence is a question. It indicates that a sentence is a question. It is used, it indicates that a sentence is a question. It indicates that a sentence is a question. It is used at the end of an interrogative sentence. It is used at the end of an interrogative sentence. It is used at the end of an interrogative sentence. The fourth one is an exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. It expresses strong emotion, excitement, or surprise. It expresses strong emotion, excitement, or surprise. It expresses emotion, excitement, or surprise. So those are the four main stops of punctuations, right? For example, when the reason why they are called, why do you think they are called stops? When you are using this particular full stop, right, it means that sentence has come to an end, isn't it? For example, you write a sentence, at the end of the sentence you put a full stop. It is also used to indicate the end of abbreviations. For example, the end of abbreviation, for example, yes? For example what? So an example, sasa kuna watu wanangojanga, nipatie tu example tu moja tu, hizo zingine. So for example, when you write doctor in short form, you must include that particular period mark. Don't write Dr. William Ruto. Sometimes people will say that this is indeed is correct, but when you go to a serious newsroom, that particular piece of story will be given to an editor, and there is proofreading, they will find a mistake here. Why? Because you have not indicated that period mark, that full stop mark. Dr. William Ruto. It's abbreviated as D, capital D and small d, then a full stop. And when you are going to be in a newsroom, I'm sure you've been writing and maybe you have not been paying attention. It is actually very different when you go to a newsroom. You have to adhere to some of these things. So at the end of an abbreviation, which another one? Can we use a full stop? Correct. Mr. Now, look at your writing. Some of us write just Mr. and they fail to indicate that full stop. It's wrong in terms of writing skills. Mr. Of course, there is Mrs. Don't tell me Mrs. Don't even tell me Miss. Isn't it? How do we abbreviate, madam? Correct. M-D. Stop. Honorable. What do we abbreviate, honorable? H-O-N. Yes? Mountain. How do you abbreviate mountain?
Name of a place like Nairobi.
Nairobi? So how is Nairobi abbreviated?
NRB.
Is NRB? Of course, I've seen this one. Is it semantically recognized? Because there are people who will want to come with their short forms. Isn't it? Of course, when you're writing this in a Kenyan context, somebody knows that this is Nairobi, isn't it? But is it universally accepted? Maybe, maybe not. Because it's within our country. USA. USB. Yes? Correct. Sir. So sir is abbreviated like, is it this or is it this? How is sir written? Sir is written like this, isn't it? So when you're abbreviating it is SR, then a full stop. Because you can't write up the sir itself in full, then you write a full stop. Then that one, this one ceases to have a meaning according to what period dictates as a stop in punctuation. You're going to note that when you are going to use all these particular marks, when you are writing them, there must be a pause. When it comes to a comma, you are separating, you are taking a breath to proceed to the next. Like the way we have said, it separates the list of items. So you can't write and say, for example, I woke up early in the morning and ate oranges, bananas, potatoes. This is somebody who has appetite. Watermelon, all that. And you fail to indicate the commas. When somebody is reading that particular, and this applies to when you are reading news. You know they are in the teleprompter, the auto cue. So you must give that particular anchor breathing space. Otherwise they will read and collapse. How many of us have read news in a teleprompter? We will read news in a teleprompter. Correct. I wanted that, amen. So when you are going to read and there is no this abbreviation, it's hard because you need time to pause and say about the next word. What guides you is this particular mark known as comma, isn't it? When you hear somebody is taken to a comma, that's out of context. Ni kama maisha yake kwanza inafika imesimama kwanza, anangojea maisha ingine. That's out of context anyway. But comma is actually supposed to give you a stop in the reading of that particular sentence. A question mark, and sometimes I have seen people make mistakes. Of course, I also do make mistakes as well. But when it comes to professionally, there are people who write a question and they fail to indicate a question mark. You remember when you were writing the class for prepositions? Prepositions. Not prepositions. When you are saying, you are smart, you are smart. Then you say, are you? Question tags, correct. Hey. Somebody was paying attention in high school. Eh? So, you are not smart. What is the question, Tan? Please don't make me laugh this early morning. I want us to put the right question tag here, so that we use this question mark. You are smart, are you? You are not smart. So ya kwanza linafaa kuwa? Aren't you? You are not smart. How many of us genuinely remembered this? Roy, you remembered this genuinely? How many of us? So when the sentence is negative, the answer is? Okay. Yeah, it's good, it's good. Anyway, yeah, that's true. So when you use an interrogative question in the sentence, please make sure that you always remember to indicate a question mark. So, that is it, exclamation mark. You are surprised. Wow. Is that your cloth? Is that your cloth? What does that sentence tell you? Wow. Is that your cloth? So first of all, in terms of what we have read, is this punctuation correct? Where is the mistake? So we'll put a question mark here, correct. So can you try to decode the meaning of this particular sentence? What is the meaning of this particular sentence? Wow. Is that your cloth? That's how Kenyans compliment each other, especially if you have a nice cloth, isn't it? So what does that sentence mean? It means that this particular speaker, it's actually surprised that you could show up with that particular cloth. Because previously, you could not maybe turn up with such kind of a cloth. Whether it is ragged, or whether it is a suit, or whether it is an African wear, or whether it is something like that. So somebody is surprised. And how do we know? Because of this particular mark. So when somebody tells you, explain 4 stops of punctuation, I expect you to talk about period, comma, question mark, exclamation mark, and their applications. And you explain why those particular 4 are called stops, because they indicate end of a particular statement and the beginning of another one. Sometimes it is a pause, like for example, a comma or an exclamation mark. These 2 indicate they are normally at the end of the sentences. This one can be in between the sentences. Otherwise, if you start a sentence with a comma, then you have a serious mental problem, isn't it? You can't start a sentence with a comma, or you start a sentence with an exclamation mark. I mean, there is something serious about you. So those are the 4 main stops of punctuation. And I want us now, after we have... Any got a tissue? Yes, Frederick? Yes, please.
So, in office, like, order, maybe a manager. Should you include also a full stop director?
I'm not sure whether I have understood the question. Can you...
Because we say that for doctor, D is capitalized and R is small. But for director in office, D, all.
You're talking about a director?
Yes.
This one?
Yes, DR is capitalized.
DR. That's the abbreviation for a director? Yes? But isn't it? Wewe tunataka find out kama Steve, are you even serious? Remember, listen, I have said, when it comes to these particular abbreviations, we have to focus on the ones that are universally accepted. Universal means it's applied everywhere, isn't it? Because when you talk about a mister, we know the abbreviation of a mister. That's why I had reservations with Nairobi and maybe even because we could say Mombasa is MSA. No, I'm saying we could say, I'm not saying that is the issue. We could say that Mombasa is MSA. And actually I've seen people write Mombasa like this. MSA. Mombasa who comes from Mombasa here? So you can't speak authoritatively about Mombasa if you don't come from Mombasa. At least I've gone there, so I know how some of those people. What do you think is the possible abbreviation for Mombasa? Wachana na 001 wewe. And I'm trying to find an answer for Victor, because you're going to find that we struggle, because you could say, yes.
Maybe MD,
Managing director. No, I'm saying managing director is derived from the first letter and the other letter, isn't it? So that one, we cannot say it's an abbreviation, it's a short form. An abbreviation must mean something universally. Because MD, when you go to China, it can be. Yeah? It can mean something else. But when you go to China and write like this, they automatically know that one is Mr. It's like there we have KPLC. KPLC. KPLC, the only person who can answer that question is somebody who comes from Kenya. Isn't it? Because they know when the K is there, it automatically represents Kenya. And now they will farm with the rest. Isn't it? So, we have a distinction between abbreviations and short forms. So that is it. I was asking for something to write. I forgot my last one. Can you appreciate Harrison? It's a very nice gesture. Not that Frederick failed. Why is it that? Why is it that Frederick can't have? Okay. Let me stop there. I want us to discuss about something else in regards to punctuation that is also very important, especially when you are writing. Colon versus semicolon. First of all, what is the identification of a colon? Two full stop. Aligned. What is the alignment? Vertical, horizontal? Vertical. Semicolon? In case you didn't know, but I know you know. So at what circumstances do we actually use colon and semicolon? At what circumstances do we actually use colon and semicolon? Anyway, let's write something. A colon introduces a list, explanation, or quote. Sorry. A colon introduces a list, explanation, or quote Let's talk about semicolon. Maybe you can, so that we can write them in terms of a table, we can write maybe semicolon and colon, or colon and semicolon, so that we find the differences. At what circumstances do we use a colon, and what circumstances do we actually use a semicolon? So the first one, we have said that a colon introduces a list or explanation or a quote. Then, when it comes to a semicolon, joins two independent clauses, that are closely related and could stand alone as sentences. That is very important for you to note. It joins two independent clauses that are closely related and could stand alone as sentences. In the colon, let's go to the colon part now. You capitalize the first word if it starts a sentence. Capitalize the first word if it starts a sentence. Capitalize the first word if it starts a sentence. That is on the colon. Do not capitalize, semicolon, do not capitalize unless a proper noun follows. Do not capitalize unless a proper noun follows. I'm sure you have heard people report President William Ruto was in Kakamega and he said, and I quote. So remember, we are listening to what that reporter is saying, isn't it? But that reporter was reading from a script. So when you are writing that script and you are saying, and I quote, the writing should be correct. And because I know the importance of what I'm saying, I will continue to emphasize that you take keen note in regards to these particular marks. For example, when we have talked about a colon, it is used to introduce a list, explanation, or a quote. So, President William Ruto say, and I quote, what follows? Yes? You quote with, what are these marks called? Quotation marks, isn't it? So, and I quote. What did he say? Something he said? Tutatenga, in English. What did he say? Can you quote something the president said? Somebody, can you quote something that the president said? Yes. Yes, I am in charge. I am in charge. I am in charge. And we are hoping that the list continues anyway. So I'm just trying to show you when you use this particular colon, it's when you are listing or you are quoting a particular quote. And remember, in the application of the colon, you have said, please do not use a capital letter in the second sentence if it's not a proper noun. You remember what we said about a proper noun? These are names of places, people, right? And such like names. So, for example, so the president said, and I quote, we will work together with all leaders So let's try to understand the second sentence. For example, let's try to understand the second sentence. According to what we have said about a colon, is it correct? Why is it not correct? Why is it not correct? Because when you look at we, is it a proper noun? It is not a proper noun. So this one, it's a capital letter. I hope capital, you know how a W small letter looks like, isn't it? So this one is not a small letter. This is a capital letter. So this sentence would be wrong when you're writing it. Why? Because you have capitalized after the end of a colon, and the start of the noun is not a proper noun. There are people who are known as academic writers. No scare. There are people who write papers for others. Mtu anafanya academic writing. Sikia urafiki yangu anafanya academic writing. Kina kontuna gari amepaka hapo nje, kazi yake tu ni kuandika. They write articles and papers for people who, some of them are abroad and stuff like that. You must understand these things, because if you don't, for example, adhere to these particular rules, you are going to make that person lose some marks, and then when they lose marks, of course, you are not paid. It is as simple as that. So there's that. Let's talk about the semicolon. We have said that a semicolon separates two independent clauses. Can somebody give us an example such that when you read that sentence, we can separate that sentence and it can stand, every sentence can stand on its own. For example, I watched the football match. I was very disappointed. I watched the football match. I was very disappointed. So you can see that we can actually have two sentences here. The first one can stand on its own, and in the next topic we will talk about construction of sentences. For a statement to be regarded as a sentence, what must it have? It must have a noun and a predicate, that is the verb. So when you look at these particular two sentences, the first sentence, I watched the football match, I was very disappointed. We could write those sentences independently and both will make sense. Why? Because they have a noun and they have a verb. A sentence must have a noun and must also have a verb. Because there is no sentence that contains either of the two. For example, but Kenyans are very funny. They can use a noun to communicate. Cynthia. Instead of saying Cynthia come, Cynthia has come. Why? Because there is a kind of an understanding when I call your name, it means that you come. Or you just call the name, and the non-verbal cues will communicate anchor. So our mothers and our fathers, typically, they could communicate with your name, and the eye contact will communicate the rest. Especially, for example, if you are... kuna watu walikuwa wanapakua chakula na anapigwa tu na jicho. Hiyo story inaishia hapo, isn't it? Right? So, anyway, let's come back to class. You can't use a verb or a noun. Eating. Or eating. Walking. You must have a noun and a verb. So anyway, so it's about connecting two independent clauses to the extent that the clauses can stand on its own. So that's about colon and semicolon. Then there are other particular marks that we have. For example, this one. This one is called what? Is it an hyphen or a dash? Is it an hyphen or a dash? Are you sure? Understood. Minus. Negative. You see how some of these things look very easy, but sasa nimepewa underscore, nimepewa minus, dash, hyphen, negative, subtract. And I'm not saying that you're not making sense, but you have to have what we call proper identification of this particular symbol, isn't it? And know when to use it. So the underscore one, we can start eliminating which cannot be this one. So this one automatically is not underscore. First of all, underscore, is it a creation of language or is it a creation of social media? It's a creation of social media. So we cannot subject it to scrutiny when it comes to linguistics. Otherwise, you won't find a dictionary having a meaning of underscore. Right? So let's make that very clear, in clear broad light. When I hear people talk about subtraction or minus, I want to understand where they are coming from. But again, we don't use that one in sentences. We use that one in mathematics. So mathematics, those are not sentences, those are figures. So when you say 2 minus 3 is equals to 7, for example, right? This one, can you read this sentence?
2 minus 3.
Right? 2-3. So mathematically we can understand, first of all, let me, because somebody can just accidentally walk in and ask about the credibility of that teacher who was here. Is he of sound mind and intellectually capable? So it's very hard for people to read this as a sentence linguistically, but it is very easy to read it as figures. So that's why we cannot have a discussion of this as a subtraction, right? So anytime we minus, there's something like minus. It's a subtraction sign, which is a minus sign. Hakuna minus is subtraction. So let's now narrow down to those people who are saying, so this one can only be a dash or an hyphen. So this one is actually not an hyphen, it's a dash. Because an hyphen has a shorter length. So the difference between a dash and an hyphen is not in the identification of the symbol. It is in the identification of the length. Correct. So let's talk about a dash. Let's talk about a dash. A dash. A long dash or a dash is used to indicate a strong break or interruption in sentence. A dash is used to indicate a strong break or interruption in a sentence. It emphasizes or creates a break. It emphasizes or creates a break or links information. It emphasizes or creates a break or links information. So that is the dash. So let's talk about the hyphen now. When we talk about the dash, now let's talk about the hyphen. And in what circumstances do we actually use an hyphen? So when you're writing about the dash, please write the dash and indicate the symbol in a manner that you ought to differentiate with the hyphen in terms of the length. So an hyphen, it's used to join words or parts of words together. An hyphen used to join words to connect words or parts of words together. For example, it is used to connect compound adjectives. It is used to connect compound adjectives or compound nouns. It is also, for example, it is used to connect compound adjectives or compound nouns. It is also used in some prefixes. It is also used in some prefixes. So before we focus on the others, so an hyphen and a dash. This one is to break some information. You're breaking a conversation. For example, when you emphasize for it, she finally found the answer. She finally found the answer after a long search. She finally found the answer after a long search. So a question can come in an exam, right? And the question is, they have written that particular sentence, and they are telling you to explain the usage of that particular symbol as part of punctuation. So what will you say? That particular symbol is called a dash, and it is used to break the information between the person who was searching the answer and how long does that particular activity was going on. For how long was that particular activity? So it is breaking, right? This part from this part. It's like when we are talking about the what? The semicolon. Is you break between two sentences, but this one is breaking the information. Remember in semicolon, it's about independent clauses. But this one, it is to break in one sentence, right? In just one sentence, you break that particular sentence into two, right? Communicating the relationship between the first part and the second part. So that is the dash, which is not so often used anyway. But when it comes to hyphen, it is actually used more often, isn't it? Because when you talk about, for example, we have said it's used to maybe connect words or parts of words. When you talk about compound adjectives, somebody can ask, first of all, do you understand what is an adjective? An adjective describes more about a noun or a verb, right? So the chair is well designed. The chair is well designed. That particular symbol there, right? Another example of a compound adjective, construct a sentence and I put a compound adjective there. Yes? Any person? Let's give it a try. The good thing when you're in class, you are allowed to make mistakes. Well designed. Poorly done. Right? Your work was poorly done. Right? Your work was poorly done. So that's a compound adjective. Let's talk about a compound noun. Mother-in-law. Another example, don't tell me father-in-law, don't tell me father-in-law. Another example. Sure. Can we move away from the in-laws then? Can we go and focus on something else? Yes? Yes? Closer. Correct? Closer. Very, very good. Don't tell me medium short. Compound eyes. Does boyfriend have an hyphen? Boyfriend is imechikana? Okay. The prefixes. Prefixes. For example, ex-boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. You must put an hyphen, right? Another prefix? Miss. Misinterpretation. Another prefix. Military. Any other prefix? So ex-military, I agree. Discontinued, correct. Let's continue. Slash. 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 When do we actually use slash, right? Slash. Slash. That is the simple slash. Slash, the function that it represents or separates alternatives, represents or separates alternatives, it is also used for numerical expressions. It is also used to indicate numerical expressions. It is also used in abbreviations. Also used in abbreviations. Last but not the least, to separate lines of poetry or lyrics. To separate lines of poetry or lyrics. Last mark that I want us to discuss is what we call an apostrophe. 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 What? Yes, it is. No, it is not apostrophe, it's an apostrophe. Isn't it? So, this is the time that I say, it depends whether you went to kindergarten or Montessori, isn't it? It is called an apostrophe.
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 Yes.
You want to use the last E. Yeah, it's good to interact with folks from the other side, isn't it? You are going to hear how they are going to be pronouncing some of these things, But it is well, isn't it? Don't worry. We all have our fair share of place in our society. So, as much as you want to use apostrophe, you can use so as much as you want to do it.
The spelling is correct.
Yes, correct. That is very, very vital. As long as the spelling is correct. Anyway, an apostrophe or an apostrophe is used to show possession. Show possession. Is used to show possession. That's the first part. It is also used to indicate omitted letters or numbers. It is also used to indicate omitted letters or numbers. So, possession and omission. An example of possession. Possession.
The years.
Correct. Years. Hours. Right. Yes. So it's used to show possession. That is obvious. I'm sure that you know that when you want to associate something with somebody, you can use an apostrophe or an apostrophe, as we say, to show possession. Omission. This is like when you want to, there are people who are lazy in terms of writing now.
Yes.
This is now where you shine, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
You even agree. So when you are using your phone to type, how many of us have what we call auto correction on?
All the time.
So we have Frederick, you have Steve, we have Charles, you have Rachel. You don't have autocorrection. So the others, you, let me hear, what motivates you to put it, the autocorrection?
To know how to write some difficult words.
To know how to write some difficult words. I love your honesty. That means that, let me not say what I... Unaweza kosea. I don't like it because I saw a meme, I don't know whether it happened. When you are saying, hi, Liz, then it says, lizard. So, you did see that, you know there's a way you continue, and it adjusts itself, eh? And then because of the love and agitation and the anxiety to send the message, you fail to proofread. So you have texted, hi lizard, I wish I could see you tonight. And that person happens to be online immediately. So before you realize you want to edit, anatuma emoji ya kushtuka. So hell starts breaking loose, isn't it? So please, I know the motive behind autocorrection, but try as much as possible to be authentic. Because autocorrection is good sometimes, but it happens sometimes to the detriment of your English skills to write and to your ability to think. That word you are saying is difficult. That's why I encourage people who have rich vocabulary of words. But when you write, for example, I want to thank you all. For example, like that one. Is it written like that? How is that spelled? You are reading. Let's read this one. First of all, is it written like this?
No.
Okay. How is it written like? Y A double L. Where's
A and L.
where do we place the apostrophe? Between A and
And the first A.
wewe wacha wewe usiende hapo. Don't confirm first, eh? Don't confirm first, please. Where do we actually put the apostrophe? Because I have seen people even put here, here, here. Different people. Yaandika hivi. You. So, like I am coming to this one, because okay, surely this one is you just write you all, isn't it? You only do just one letter inafanya tu siandike.
You will.
Oh, this one is okay. So what is this one? You will. So we have you all, isn't it? Can we write you all? Why? Of course there is Y, isn't it? We can all agree there is Y. Isn't it? Let's proceed. It's good to see you all. Aya. Can you go now to your autocorrection? Can you go to your autocorrection? So, I have a problem, I have a problem. Maybe you can help me and discuss this problem. How is this one pronounced?
Yawn.
Eh?
Yawn. But it's not formal English.
formal English. So it's some you all, and it's this one.
It's not, doesn't sound bougie.
It doesn't sound bougie. So if you are not bougie, you can't pronounce this one, isn't it? So this one is for the bougie folks. Bougie folks. Umeenda shags umetumia hii. Isn't it? Ukienda shags utumia hii unapewa bilia. Watu wenye wako hapo around you, isn't it? I want to buy something for you. Isn't it? Ukisema hivyo unaachiwa kiti, isn't it? Na unapewa fan inaanza kupuliza hapo around, isn't it? Right? Because I knew the reason why I have written that letter, because I have seen different versions of your and whatever, and the people who are speaking it, they seem to have some similar character traits. First of all, the coiling of the mouth, how they pronounce it, it's not the normal. You don't. It's just not the normal. Yeah? You must make sure that your mouth can pronounce it, and your tongue is not heavy. You cannot succeed with a tongue, heavy tongue, this one. Otherwise you might end up biting your tongue. It's not possible, isn't it? I'm out of the matter. How many of us use this one in their normal small chat, small talks? How many of us use this one?
For informal information.
Informal talk.
For informal talks, of course. We walked in and I see your Peter Muema, see your Safacom is there. Good morning, you all. You are submitting a proposal. Then they are actually looking at where have you been captured from, isn't it? They're actually struggling to understand where have you even come from, isn't it? So it's mostly used for informal discussions. That's correct. I was asking, how many of us genuinely use this one? So Cynthia does. Okay. Any other notable examples to show mission for? Hey. My friend, what is your motive? Because now I am not getting it. This one we have agreed is correct. Unadanganya na nani? Na unakubali? We must also examine the kind of people we are talking to, because if they also understand this one, kumalizia story. Story inaisha. Don't worry, we have all our space in life. Don't worry. Don't worry. Any other example? Like a genuine short-formed word and it's formal. Don't, correct? Don't. Huh?
Informal.
Informal?
An informal word. 8. Huh? Wound. Which one is that? This one. Wound. Is it formal? Wound. Is it written like wood? What a wood mean? That's just example. Informal, another informal. Eight. Eight.
Which one is spell it?
AIGHT.
GHT.
All right.
Which one? This one is?
All right. The option is between A and I.
Oh, A and I.
A and I.
have eliminated this one.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Bro.
I have also made peace that depending on where you come from.
Depending also on the movies you watch.
Yeah, no, I do know.
No, to not get now.
Hey, let's not use that to insult some others, yes? Let's be careful. There is, I have remembered, there is a group of people who graduate straight from high school and they start texting like this. This one means? Sasa. I have never understood. Somebody said Sasa. Right?
Sour.
Can you bring back mine to class? Because I can feel some people are...
Sour.
Sour? Isn't it?
Chezo zilipitwa na
Somebody texted, I was taking them on a revision. I can to me at 208. So I was asking, do you want 208 shillings? 208. What is 208? What is 208? No, the function of short forms is to communicate. In a compressed manner. So this one, when you are pronouncing it, makes sense, isn't it? But now, in terms of reading, is a big problem. So this one is my short form of all times, by the way. I have never gotten another one because I thought these are numerical figures, only to understand later that it was actually a full sentence. Tuonane. So be careful. In fact, if your people text like, at least we can, as it progresses down, you can detect some class. When it goes up like, especially here, there is some retrogressiveness, right?
Yes.
There is some serious problems when it comes to your language. So, yeah, at least you have an example to have in mind when it comes to... So slash, we never discussed. Alternative, so I will either have fish or what?
Chicken.
That's a fish or ugali, because I want to showcase the application of this one. So this one, when you are writing like this one is supposed to show or alternative. I'm either going to have fish or chicken wing. We have said it's also used to, is it in poetry? You wrote something about poetry, isn't it? Numerical expression, correct? Like for example? Huh? You are saying? Numerical expression? Correct, yeah.
24/7.
When you are writing date, which one comes first, by the way? Is it the day, the month, or the year? You start with the year. You start with the year. What is the format of writing a date? So you write 2025? So this is the...
Yeah. The year, the month, God,
So unasoma na nyuma. So I have struggled with in the manner in which how people write time. So I don't know whether I'm not sure about this one, but I believe this one is the one that is recognized, isn't it? The day, the month, and the year. There are variations, of course. This numerical representation and all that. So these are things that I'm sure that we all know about. Let us proceed to so one thing about apostrophe, it is not used in plural regular nouns. Sometimes for example, when you are writing teachers, we have said they can show possession, isn't it? An apostrophe. So how do you write this one? Do you write like this? Yes? How do you write this one? Isn't it?
Yes.
Tunaekea hapo. Tunaekea hapo. To show possession that something belongs to the teachers. Because it's a plural regular noun. So you don't write teachers, alafu unaongeza s ingine, alafu unaweka apostrophe. This one is wrong. This one is right. Isn't it? So these are very simple things that people don't, and I've seen. So by the time I see you writing like this, of course, you have not understood apostrophe as a punctuation mark. Let's talk about sentence structure. Sentence structure, and we call it a day. Sentence structure. And then next week we shall be discussing about English in the newsroom. No, the other week but one, because next week we are going to get to production. Basic sentence structure. Basic sentence structure. And we say basic sentence structure. Basic sentence structure. A sentence is typically made up of at least a subject and a verb. A sentence is typically made up of at least a subject and a verb. Into brackets, a predicate. A predicate. So if you want to sound very academic, the verb is also referred to as the predicate. Correct. So, the subject, let's talk about the subject. The person, the thing, or the idea performing the action or being described. That is the subject. So the subject is the person, thing, or idea performing the action or being described. The person, the thing, or idea being described, performing the action or being described. The person, thing, or idea performing the action or being described. The verb. Let's talk about the verb. The verb, that's the predicate. This is the action or state of being in the sentence. This is the action or state of being in the sentence. So please, I know I've emphasized that. So I'm saying the verb is the state, the action or state of being in the sentence. So a correct, not even a good, a correct sentence must have a noun and a predicate. As simple as that. And I know that, so there are so many other the components of the sentence we can have, an adjective or an adverb and all that. But at least a sentence must have a noun and the verb. This is the person, thing, or the idea that is performing the action. The person, the thing, or the idea that is performing the predicate, performing the verb. And we don't have to keep on emphasizing that because it's self-explanatory. Let's talk about components of a sentence structure. What are some of the components of a sentence structure? Components of a sentence structure. The first one is a noun phrase. Noun phrase, component of a sentence structure. The first one is a noun phrase. A noun phrase, a group of words that functions as the subject of a sentence. The noun phrase, a group of words that functions as the subject of a sentence. The verb phrase is component number 2. Verb phrase, verb phrase, verb phrase. This is the main verb along with its auxiliaries. This is the main verb along with its auxiliaries. The main verb together with its auxiliaries. The main verb together with auxiliaries. Then we have the objects, and we have two. We have the direct object. We have the direct object. The direct object receives the action of the verb, receives the action of the verb, receives the action of the verb, receives the action of the verb. The indirect object, so the direct object receives the action of the verb. In the indirect object, the recipient of the direct object. The indirect object is the recipient of the direct object. So for example, when maybe we distinguish direct and indirect object. For example, she wrote a letter. The letter is the direct object. She wrote a letter. She gave him the letter. So him is the indirect object. The direct object is the letter. The him is the indirect object. The recipient of the action, of the object rather, sorry. The recipient of the object. So noun phrase and verb phrase, these are things we've discussed. Let's talk about types of sentences. Types of sentences. Types of sentences, the common types of sentences that we are going to be interacting with. The first one is a declarative. A declarative. 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 A declarative sentence makes a statement. Makes a statement. Makes a statement. The second one is interrogative. Interrogative sentence. Interrogative sentence. Asks a question. Asks a question. Asks a question. Then we have imperative sentence. This one gives a command or request. An imperative sentence, it gives a command or request. Gives a command or request. Exclamatory sentence is the last but not the least. Exclamatory shows strong emotions. They show strong emotion. They show strong emotion. They show strong emotion.